Welcome to Rebel Spirit Radio, exploring the frontiers of spirituality, consciousness, the esoteric, and humanity's sacred relationship with the living earth. I'm your host, Nick Mather, and in this episode, I am joined by Tamra Lucid, musician, riot girl, documentary film producer, and author of the recently published Making the Ordinary Extraordinary, My 7 Years in Occult Los Angeles with Manly Palmer Hall. Along with talking about her experience with Mr. Hall, Tamra discusses his wife Marie, who is a mystic and philosopher in her own right. We talk about the value of dusty old books, the importance of wisdom over smarts, and music as a metaphysical experiment. Tamra Lucid is a founding member of the experimental rock band Lucid Nation. She was a writer and editor for Utopia magazine and the principal interviewer for the original Reality Sandwich. Tamra's zine writing was published in several compilations, including A Girl's Guide to Taking Over the World, Writings from the Girl Zine Revolution, Zine Scene, and Riot Girl, Revolution Girl Style Now. She has produced documentary films including Exile Nation, The Plastic People, End of the Line, The Women of Standing Rock, and the award-winning Viva Cuba Libre, Rap is War, an award-winning documentary about Cuban hip-hop legend Los Aldeanos. Tamra is also the author of Making the Ordinary Extraordinary, My 7 Years in Occult Los Angeles with Manly Palmer Hall, which is her first book. Tamra, welcome to Rebel Spirit Radio.
Thank you, Nicholas.
Okay, thank you. I'm very much looking forward to speaking with you today. And I wanted to congratulate you on your book. It was quite an enjoyable read. The book is very fast-paced, and I thought, though, that the writing style perfectly captured the character of a specific time in Los Angeles. So I hope everyone runs out and buys a copy of this book. It was a true joy to read.
Oh, thank you.
So I want to begin with the person who the book is largely about. And as you wrote in the book, Manly Palmer Hall wrote more than 150 books and pamphlets. He was an active public speaker. Videos of many of his lectures are still available online. I was actually watching one, listening to one in preparation for this. His 1942 lecture, The Secret Destiny of America, you said set an attendance record at Carnegie Hall. And his book, and I'm going to give the full title here, An Encyclopedic Outline of Masonic, Hermetic, Kabbalistic, and Rosicrucian Symbolic Philosophy, which is more widely known as The Secret Teachings of All Ages, has never gone out of print and is still influential. Yet you also noted that Manly Palmer Hall remains relatively obscure and unknown. So who was Manly Palmer Hall?
I think he was an incredibly intelligent man, started out as a very intelligent young man, raised by his grandma. When she passed away, he came to LA and he kind of invented himself in a way that was, he could satisfy his desire for knowledge. So he was always on this perpetual journey of discovering great culture, great philosophical thought, how the human being tries to find a place in life that is healthy, rewarding not just on the physical level, but rewarding on a spiritual level, a mental level, keeping your mind active and things like that. So I think he managed to take his own inclinations towards always learning and turn that into a vocation, which, is kind of wonderful. Do what you love, is really what it comes down to. And what he loved happened to be of great benefit to other people. I think he started a little bit on the occult side. It was, fanciful and interesting and entertaining, but he soon figured out that was kind of superficial. And it was more the philosophical side of it that was really what was the best of what all that had to offer. So maybe something like that.
Yeah. Well, it mirrors the impression that I got when I was reading your book, which was that he was a lifelong seeker.
Yeah.
Even though he wrote, extensively and he lectured every week, you said that it was a 90-minute lecture
Yeah.
every Sunday. He doesn't, when you listen to his lectures and everything you wrote in your book, he does not come across as like a guru or a self-proclaimed spiritual leader, but rather someone who was genuinely interested in searching for knowledge and sharing that knowledge with a larger audience.
Yeah, exactly. He was just, I think in a way, it was just, he was sharing the joy he found in all this stuff. Isn't it fascinating? Isn't this interesting? Isn't that a beautiful concept? Imagine if we took that and applied that in our lives, how much better our lives could be, and I think he taught that straight through, even to the end. He was just that kind of guy. It's sharing this beautiful information with as many people as possible, hopefully benefiting others.
And that's rare, I think, these days.
It's always been rare. I think it's always been rare.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But along those lines, and I'm not entirely sure how to express this, there's something, timeless. I don't know if that's the right word, maybe anachronistic about Manly Palmer Hall. You wrote that you were still surprised to discover that he was still alive after you initially discovered the secret teachings of all ages.
Yeah.
And I feel something similar. It doesn't seem possible that he died just a little over 30 years ago.
Yeah.
He seems like he belongs to a totally different age.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, he's bringing up Aristotle, and he's bringing up Plato, and he's all these people through the ages, as it were, that same lineage of thought that transcends time. This is what would you call it? This is the soul evolving. This is what we have been doing and striving for since we all sat around the fire for protection and warmth. And we're going to remember our ancestors now. And we only had the stories at first, then we went to cave paintings, and we moved on from there. Books are awful nice when you think about it.
Yeah.
And Google search is even better when used correctly. So it's simply the transmission of information. That's why I equated, it was like being in a honeybee hive. Everybody's saying where the best flowers are, wanting to share the information on the good stuff that makes us better, that helps feed us. So this is the soul going through time. That's why it seems timeless. It's more of a soul searching, a soul adventure. And so you can relate to it as if it's there with you. And then it also seems like it's something beyond time. So maybe that's how I describe it.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I had in my notes, one of the things that I noted down as I was listening to one of his lectures. And just for clarity, the title of the lecture that I was listening to was The Search for Man's Natural Religion. And the note what I noted down was timeless truths.
There you go.
So we're on the same wavelength here, I think. So you wrote.
He translated stuff so beautifully.
Okay. Yeah.
It had such a way with that, and again, making it timeless.
Right. Yeah. Listening to him speak, I was very impressed as well with his speaking skills.
Oh, doesn't he have a beautiful voice?
Yeah, he has a beautiful voice, and there were no verbal pauses.
Yeah.
No ums or uhs.
Yeah, that doing these interviews, and I hear myself doing the ums and stuff. And I think of that man and his massive skill set with that. It's boggling, it's like Mr. Hall was all right. He was really good at what he did.
Yeah. Well, it's like he was born to do it, I think,
finding our natural place. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So you first became aware of him when you discovered a copy of The Secret Teaching of All Ages while browsing at the Bodhi Tree Bookstore in West Hollywood.
Ronnie found
And
that book.
yeah, well, and I know this is a little bit off topic. I mean, not really,
Go ahead.
but it's bad form on a podcast to take a moment of silence. But I thought that maybe we could take a few seconds to commemorate and commiserate perhaps about the dearly departed Bodhi Tree Bookstore.
Yeah. I really miss the Bodhi Tree.
Oh, so do I. I discovered it very shortly after I moved to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
When I first moved here, I lived right at Wilshire and Fairfax.
Oh, there we go.
And I'm a bit of an anomaly. I like to walk everywhere.
Oh,
so I would just walk around, and Melrose isn't too far really from Wilshire, and that's how I found the Bodhi Tree Bookstore. And I've been for a while in my doctoral work, I was focusing on religions of South Asia, and I've been to Nepal a few times. And whenever I'm in Kathmandu, I go to the Pilgrim's Bookstore.
Do you know how unbelievably cool that sounds to someone like me? When I'm in Kathmandu, I happen to go to this one bookstore I know. Yeah.
Well, the Pilgrim's Bookstore is a little bit of a chain, I think. There may be like 4 or 5 locations. Mostly it's in India.
But one's in Kathmandu. I mean,
right. Yeah. But the point is that I wanted to make is that, I would always bring back, just tons of books. And I could find books there about South Asian religions that I couldn't find anywhere else. And I didn't think it was possible to find them anywhere in the United States. And then I discovered the Bodhi Tree Bookstore.
Yeah.
And it was like being back at the Pilgrim's Bookstore in Kathmandu.
Yeah.
I was so impressed, and I was so heartbroken when it shut its doors.
Yeah. I mean, walking through that big door, it was walking into the entire world, and their taste, the books they selected, the depth and the breadth and the quality of what they offered. And I mean, you'd always go to the new arrivals table. That was just, let's go, let's do this. And you probably spend an hour there. Then you go back to, okay, I came here for a reason. What was it? Oh yeah, this. And then spend an hour over there. And I loved that place. And just the way the floor creaked and the way that new book smell. There's something about that new book smell. Old books are kind of different. And sometimes it's like, whoa, there were mothballs in there.
Right.
but the new books, oh my goodness, it's a beautiful smell. But yeah, what they offered to everyone by being purveyors of books was unparalleled. It really just unparalleled. I just loved that place.
Yeah, I feel like it is a great cultural loss to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And they also had I don't know what it was called, the annex maybe of the used books next door.
Bookstore, yeah.
So quite a bit of my library, not quite a bit, but a bit of my library came from there.
I did a hella library out of that used bookstore. Yeah. Also, one of my favorite things about the used bookstore was the used cookbooks. You can tell so much about culture and people by the used cookbooks. Not only do you get the cookbook itself with the recipes, but then you have the former owners that put all the notes in there and put all their coupons in there or writings about their families. I mean, you'd find things you'd be, oh my God, maybe this should go to the family instead of being here at the used bookstore. But it was a fascinating study in humanity, reading the cookbooks.
Yeah. Well, and that reminds me, you include a recipe at the end of your book. Which I like. And I think it is connected to that. It gives you a real sense of Manly Palmer Hall and his wife, who I do want to talk about. Giving a recipe is just, you can enjoy something that they enjoyed. Yeah.
That was one of his favorite, ours too.
Yeah.
But Marie cooking up a meal while talking about the space mother principle, or, listen, girl, I'm going to tell you something right now. It's like,
Yeah.
Mama's got something to say.
Yeah.
Better listen.
Yeah, I do want to talk about her because I knew nothing about her. I didn't know much about Manly Palmer Hall. I was familiar with Secret Teachings, and I'm familiar with the Philosophical Research Society. I did a lecture series there.
Cool.
2015, I think it was. It wasn't the greatest experience. Nothing about them at all. It was just the worst year of my life.
Well then, yeah.
But I had known about the Philosophical Research Society even before then. And I was really thrilled to be invited to do a series with them. So I want to get into PRS a little bit. But since you mentioned Marie, let's talk about Marie. You said that she seemed to be her husband's intellectual equal. And you also described her as the first riot girl you ever met.
Oh, yeah. That was a funny realization, because you're going over your memory of this person, and then coupled with the experience you had in a completely different place. And suddenly the realization comes over you, oh my God, she's just like a riot girl. and then when I did that list of things, I was kind of stunned. I didn't realize it at the time, but yeah, she was pretty much right there. And she would have, definitely been in a band, had a lot of zines, and probably taken over the world if she had half a chance. And Riot Girl might have afforded her that chance. So might have been a very different world we're in right now.
Yeah. We still need Riot Girls very badly. But she had her own philosophy, didn't she? Was it like similar to what Manly Palmer Hall was teaching, or was she kind of on her own?
She was on her own. It was not similar. She was very, very strict about, it's not like, now on a level, yes, it was very much like a lot of mystics. She had a mystical experience. This was also a mystical experience that was colored by trauma. So Marie was very much speaking what I think of as trauma symbology. When people go through trauma, it's very difficult for them to express not only the reality of what they went through, but the reality that they're experiencing now, reality itself. But they are expressing it in a defensive manner. So she found a revelation. She had a revelation, and she thought that via this revelation, if she could let the world know about it, it would change the world. Now, is that Marie just having a personal revelation that if she can incorporate this personal revelation, she can now deal with the world and be free in it once again, instead of being hammered by the trauma? Well, we won't know now. But what she took out of that personal revelation, she created a religious theory, basically what I would call religious theory. And it was an extraordinary thing to listen to her speak, to have her delineate what that was. She would pull out these diagrams, and she would lay across this big drafting table these diagrams that were consciousness is the only way to describe it. And basically, I think of it as almost like the physics of consciousness, the math of consciousness, and which, isn't easy to understand, let alone conceptualize and explain to people. She could do it though. And you were sitting there. Now, for me, really super lofty intellectual stuff kind of leaves me cold. It's like, it just doesn't spin my wheels. I like more solid, what makes things better? If I feel bad, what makes me better? That kind of practical stuff. But she was like, no, no, no. I'm here to absolutely shake you down to your DNA, make you realize that this is what the world really is functioning from, and get a load of God my way. That was her.
Yeah, I
And
found. I'm sorry, I was just going to say I found some of her works on Amazon.
oh, you did?
Yeah,
Yeah. It's an interesting read, I'll tell you that much. Be ready for quite some kind of ride.
Yeah. Well, even now, philosophers are still struggling with the question of consciousness. And the fact that she was writing about this and mapping it out, you know, 40, 50 years ago is incredibly impressive.
Also, like I said, this is somebody who did the math of consciousness. That's a pretty lofty endeavor.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think she did it very well.
Yeah, I want to explore her. I think that, did she ever lecture at the Philosophical Research Society, or was this all information that only sort of friends were aware of?
Do you want me to quote her?
Sure.
About lecturing?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, Papa, I get too excited. She just like I just did right now, demonstrated, when she would try and start talking about it, it was very complex. And it was like geometry, actually. Yeah, she'd just get too excited. She'd sidetrack on stuff, little details. And so she was not a speaker. She was not a lecturer. She wasn't good at it. And that would be part of her aggravation with Mr. Hall would be, oh, Papa he had the good looks and he had the ability and, you know, all that. So, and he did. She was right about that. But she was not good at that. She, as I showed that Jean Houston moment, she also didn't have that quick ability to just jump off and go with whatever the conversation was doing. She would get her point and she'd want to get her point across, and that would take her down a rabbit hole a lot of times. So I think in the beginning, maybe in the 50s, tried to do lectures, but it just was not her forte.
Yeah, I just feel like
digging around in graveyards was her forte, scaring the locals.
Yeah, I just feel like there's something there that needs to be brought to light, I think.
And Mr. Hall, we asked Mr. Hall, without her in present, you know, what do you think of Marie's work? And he said, she's probably in the lineage of great Christian mystics. You know, that's what it sounds like to me. And he seemed to really appreciate and consider what she had to say very valuable.
Yeah. I'm happy to hear that because at that time, you know, in that generation, men were not always as supportive of the intellectual inquiries of their wives. You know?
Yeah, that wasn't done.
Right.
Women aren't supposed to be intellectual. Hey, back in the 80s, you know.
Yeah. I have a quote here, and it's completely out of context, but it's right after my notes about Marie. And maybe you can shed light on this. And I think it may be a quote of hers, or maybe it's something you wrote, but it is, women would wake humanity from the nightmare of history.
I think that's Marie.
Okay.
Yeah. She was all about the ladies, the compassion of the female, all that good stuff. That would be that's the savior of humankind. Until that is allowed to be an equal part of the human experience is lopsided and ineffective. Yeah.
Well, she's right.
Yeah.
She's absolutely right.
Yeah, she's right, you know.
Yeah, for sure. So let's kind of step back a little bit. And you discovered this book, and you and Ronnie, who would eventually become your husband, you began studying this book, and you learned that Manly Palmer Hall lectured every Sunday at the Philosophical Research Society in Los Feliz, and you went to one of the lectures. And what was your first experience of hearing Manly Palmer Hall speak?
I didn't think it was Mr. Hall.
Why not?
I don't, maybe it was the pressure. I thought possibly I was just in one of those, what would you call it? That grogginess that PTSD causes. So now when he was speaking, I had a classic Manly Palmer Hall experience, which is, it was like he was talking right at me. He mentioned something that I had noticed as I was walking to the lecture, flowers growing out of a crack in cement. Then he described the way the human soul is like a flower that flowers out of cement. It's kind of stunning when, you know, you're thinking something, you don't mention it, and then you hear a lecture and it's mentioned in the lecture and it looks like he's looking at you.
Right.
But same thing happened to Ronnie during that lecture. And then of course, turning around and looking at Ronnie and saying, you know, who was that guy? Because he was great. I really like this guy. But, you know, if Mr. Hall is anything like this, and Ronnie was kind of confused at that point. No, that was Manly Hall. Oh, really? He's great. I like this guy. All right. You know, so little fun adventure right there.
For sure. And so after this, shortly after this, I think you and Ronnie began volunteering at the Philosophical Research Society.
Yeah.
And just a few words about the Philosophical Research Society for anyone outside of the Los Angeles area. It was founded in 1934, I believe. It is a historical cultural monument in Los Angeles. It's a small building, but it's got really unique architecture. I was there. I just remembered this. I don't know if I had gone there just to check things out or to check it out, or if I was there for a meeting. But I remember one time I was there were some tourists. I believe they were German tourists that were familiar with Manly Palmer Hall, and they were there taking pictures of the campus. So I know that there are people outside of Los Angeles that are familiar with it. It had Manly Palmer Hall had collected a pretty impressive library, and he had something I think was over 50,000 volumes.
Yeah.
And he had alchemical books. I know that there's a rumor. I don't know if there's any validity to it, but there's a rumor that Carl Jung contacted them about obtaining some facsimiles of some of the alchemical books. You spent quite a bit of time in that library, didn't you?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that Carl Jung story is fabulous.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's true.
It seems like it could be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it does not at all seem outside of the realm of possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so right now, I know there are still books at the library because I've been in that library too. I just wanted to, set up a tent and hang out for a couple months.
Right.
But I know. But I think the Getty Research Institute is now in possession of most, if not all, of the alchemical manuscripts.
Yeah.
Do you know if that's true?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. I'm so glad they've got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those manuscripts and some of those books they're priceless.
Mm-hmm.
They should be in the care of the best facility possible. That's a human history thing.
Right.
That's
for sure.
So valuable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I totally agree. The Philosophical Research Society, my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, and this actually is going to connect to a couple of questions I've got for you, but I think that Manly Palmer Hall, he wanted to grow the campus, if I understand correctly. They were unable to for several different reasons, but he also had this vision of, I think, creating an accredited sort of institution for people.
Yeah. That was definitely part of a plan, but it wasn't set in stone. He was I really think that was more. Now, Pat Irvin, she was a vice president, and I think she was going for the accreditation. This way, it would go on. It would be able to make a living. It would be self-sufficient. It would keep revenue coming in. She was trying to keep the business of keeping the doors open. But he was very detached about it. He was very much, once I'm gone, I don't care. It doesn't matter. I'm gone. My work is done. That was my work, and let the chips fall where they may.
Wow, that's really interesting. I know that when I delivered the lecture series for them back in 2015, this is when Obadiah Harris was the president, and I think he took over after Hall died.
Yeah.
They had changed their name to the University of Philosophical Research because they really were trying to get that accreditation. And, the person that I worked with was Debashish Banerjee, and they were really trying to do, I think, online degrees. And they had, I think it was either a California accreditation or a national online accreditation. I think it may have been that. They didn't have any of the regional. But I remember Debashish was like, "Oh, we're almost there. We're almost there."
Oh boy!
But I that all, I think, fell apart.
Yeah.
After Obadiah passed away.
Yeah.
I know that Debashish is now chairing the East-West psychology program at the California Institute of Integral Studies up in San Francisco.
Wow.
They have completely changed their model now. And I'm kind of curious. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is when Manly Palmer Hall, when he would deliver his Sunday lectures, how big was the audience on average? Packed?
Yeah, it was always packed.
Okay.
I cannot recall in the time that I was there a Sunday that it was not just standing room only. There were always just a ton of people there. The rest of us, lecturers and stuff, not so much.
Right.
Professor Heller, Dr. Heller would bring in a steady group of people that love studying under him. Roger Weir would bring in a pretty steady group. That's all I knew of. I mean, but it was very much when anyone else lectured, it always seemed to be rather small. And
right.
When Ronnie would lecture, it's just, people who they liked that lecturer and the specialty. So that was a more refined group, a limited, but it was Manly Hall's place.
Right. Yeah. When I did my lecture series, I think I had 2 people show up.
Oh my God. You got to do flyers like a punk show.
Oh, I know. Well, it was a learning lesson for me. And I kind of co-taught one of their online classes.
Yeah.
And Obadiah Harris was teaching a class for, I forget what it is. It was an online class and they wanted me to take it over for him, but the requirement was that I have my PhD already. And it took me quite a while to finish that thing. And I felt really bad because I kept having to turn them down.
Yeah.
And then they just stopped contacting me. But I've noticed that since then, they've changed things quite a bit. And so I'm kind of curious as to how attendance is now for things. I don't know if you've ever gone back since your experiences, if you have any more current experience with the PRS. But I know they now have like a scholar in residence. I think a year ago was Mitch Horowitz. I forget who it is now. And it seems like, and they've got a online presence as well.
Yeah.
On YouTube. So I'm wondering if they're starting to get more people. I also went to one of their workshops. It was a Tarot workshop, and there was about 9 people at that, I think. Yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I did not go back.
Okay.
I've had a little contact with Mr. Horowitz, and I asked, of course, permission to reprint Mr. Hall's writing
Hmm.
from PRS, and
Right.
they were very gracious to me. Mr. Horowitz was really gracious to me, wrote some kind words about the book, but I'm not, going back,
Yeah.
when I left, and
Right.
I had, that's just the way it was.
Yeah.
And going back there, I mean, seeing his office or seeing his
Yeah.
chair, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. I can understand that. I can understand that quite a
it's like
bit.
going to a graveyard.
Yeah.
Even they all often the spiritists say, yeah, the dead people don't like you going to the graveyard going, oh, there he is. It's like, that's not me,
Right.
So yeah, that's his old stuff. And
Hmm. Yeah,
that's
for
not
sure.
what I remember.
Yeah. Yeah. When I thought that might be the case. Um,
Yeah.
but along those lines, what prompted you to write this book? Because you did go back in a way to revisit this in a sense.
Yeah. Oh, it's Arthur's fault. Arthur, Arthur made me do it.
And who's Arthur?
Arthur Johnson, and he was Mr. Hall's driver, and he also lectured at PRS. He was a great guitar player, and he was our friend, Ronnie and mine. And he volunteered also at PRS, musician. He was in the process of, he was transitioning, and he'd call us and say, now listen, kids, don't be like your Uncle Norm over here. I've got all kinds of writing. I never did a damn thing with it. He would, and he would scold me. He was scolding me and saying, you had a unique experience. You have to write this down. It's important. And, it was heavy handed. And, at first I didn't take it seriously. At first I was like, Arthur, stop it, stop it. And he was like, no, I'm serious. And he really was serious. And then I had to take it seriously. And then I wrote it. It just happened. Circumstances were that I was working with a storyteller at the time, and he's a great storyteller, Waris Hussein, working on screenplays basically. And then there was also someone else, Isis Aquaria, and she had befriended us, and she was also on talking in the other ear, saying, Tamra, you had a unique experience with Manly Hall. You really should write this down. And so I had them both, poking at me, going, you should do this, girl. And I'm like I said, I was also working on storytelling with a great storyteller. And I had some downtime because the pandemic hit. And I thought, hey, maybe I should write that story down now. And that's how it happened. It was, circumstances. And it's like, well, we ain't going to be playing with any musicians in 2020. So maybe we should go back on the writing stuff. Hey, chops are up. Let's do that. Okay. And wrote the book.
Did you find that writing the book was cathartic for you? Did it help you process the years that you were friends with the Halls?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that basically was, once I left that life, I left it. Except for getting the news about when he passed, it was just, I'm done. That we're not going back there. We can't.
Right.
Got to have this whole new life. And I proceeded with my life as such, that now I'm in a new life now. It's time to walk a different path.
According to what you wrote in the book, the friendship seemed to come to, I don't know if it was an abrupt end. It kind of seemed that way. And I know you had concerns about one person in particular. I was wondering if you could maybe say something about this, maybe the last time that you spoke with the Halls.
Well, the last time I spoke with the Halls,
Mm-hmm.
or the last time I spoke, what sealed the "you're out of here" deal?
Yeah, let's go with that.
Okay, so yeah, I when I met Fritz, I don't call him Daniel Fritz. I don't call him Daniel. It's Fritz.
Mm-hmm.
Saw him twice, and I just had a bad feeling about the dude. I don't know what to tell you, but I was just, every time I saw him, I was like, something's wrong here. Something's really, really, really wrong.
That came across in the book.
Yeah, I bet it did. Yeah, that's part of the process, Nicholas.
Sure, sure.
The third time I saw that man, I was just like, okay, hell no. And unfortunately, I went right into Mr. Hall with Ronnie, and I just had a meltdown. I did the worst thing you can do in one of those situations. I lost it.
Right.
And I told you about the cats, didn't I? Yeah, I kind of sounded like that at first. And I describe it as going through the 7 stages of death. I promised that we would leave. The process of leaving PRS had been going on for a really long time, and we were still there. Mr. Hall said, look, you guys, it's time for you to go. You're young kids. We're all old. We're all dying, and you got to get your head around that. And you don't need to be here while I go through this with my flock. I'm taking my flock home. I'm going. You should get out of here before this gets sad. Okay? You've already seen a lot of stuff here. Go on. You're young. Get out. The most compassionate thing you can imagine. However, we weren't leaving that quick, and we kept doing work for him. And but I saw Fritz the third time, went in the office with Ronnie, had a meltdown, and I actually blurted out, and I don't know where I got this. I said, I think he's going to kill you. And Mr. Hall just had enough. He just put his hand up. Like when Mr. Hall was done, he always put his hand up like a traffic cop. And he went, that's enough. And I was panicked. I was absolutely panicked. I looked around, my little eyes darting around, isn't anybody going to back me up here? Edith was standing there in the doorway looking at me like I had, to quote the poet, lobsters growing out my ears. I'd lost my mind, and I went mad like Marie. Marie was noted for her madness. And I knew I couldn't go back after that. I absolutely humiliated myself. I'd always been so calm. I'd always, been okay, but that right. I lost it.
Yeah.
But
you knew, though.
Yeah. I knew the guy was I write about it in the book. When Ronnie told me that Mr. Hall was gone, he'd read about it in the paper of all things. And being the sniper that I am, I said, Ronnie went, Mr. Hall, and I went, he's gone, right? Yeah. And he was like, yeah. And I said, was it Fritz? And he went, yeah. And I was just, oh my God, no. It's a terrible thing to be right about something.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And well, in your response, it was, you knew, and you cared. You cared so much.
I didn't know. How could I? That's not knowing. There's no proof. Mr. Hall asked if there was proof.
Yeah, but there are, I think, don't you title this Cassandra in the book? Isn't that what
that's what the title of the book was going to be?
Yeah.
That was not Making the Ordinary Extraordinary was not the original title I came up. I wanted to be Cassandra.
Yeah.
Because I'll give you the gift of prophecy and nobody's going to believe you, girl.
Yeah.
Yay.
For sure. Yeah, no, that's an apt title. And it was a chapter title at the very least.
Yeah.
And I really didn't know much about the death of Manly Palmer Hall I'd seen a few videos on YouTube, I think, that addressed it. And I also recently discovered what Marie wrote, and that she published that she believed that he had been murdered.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Look, that's senior abuse.
Yeah.
You know, can we take a glance back at what happened with Stan Lee? My God, this happens all the time. Somebody comes in, they take advantage of a vulnerable human being, and suddenly they're the sole heir to the whole estate.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens in small ways, and it happens on big scale ways. But yeah, I still, oh, well, I get really worked up about it, just like Marie.
Yeah. Well, I can understand why. I can definitely understand why. I kind of want to move away from that, and because I know we're starting to run out of time here. But you said that he really didn't care what happened to PRS after his death.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you also mentioned that academia didn't really take him seriously.
Yeah.
And I know that Ronnie actually went to college, and one of his initial goals, it seemed, was to try to bring legitimacy to the things that Manly Palmer Hall was writing about and teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Did it bother him that he wasn't taken seriously by academia?
I don't think it bothered him a bit.
Okay.
No.
Yeah. That was my sense.
Yeah, I think that it's sort of like this. They're doing what they do. I'm doing what I do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm good with what I do. If they're good with what they do, that's good for them.
Yeah.
I'll do what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
This is my good work. And I try to do the best I can, and I help people. Let's hear academics say that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I find it refreshing. And I was wondering what it would be like for him now. There's a move for many people. I'm going to try to avoid my own kind of rant here.
Go ahead.
Well, academia is poison. And a good friend of mine who also has been in academia, she always likes to quote Kurt Vonnegut with this. And so excuse my language, but
go ahead. No, I love Vonnegut.
I think that his line was that academia has its head shoved up its own ass. And that's pretty accurate, I think.
And it can be like that.
Yeah. And I've noticed a movement, right now, like 70 to 75% of college instructors are part-timers with no job security, no benefits. And I'm one of them. And I've noticed this movement of scholars just leaving academia altogether and setting up YouTube channels.
Right.
And it seems like in this atmosphere, I was wondering about that, it seems like Manly Palmer Hall could flourish in this.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is a difference. Academia is, don't call it a nut, don't call it academia. But do you want to be smart or do you want to be wise?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Smart is great, but wise is better. Mm. You can, there's book knowledge and then there's wisdom, experience, and people do feel or know or experience the difference. Yeah. I don't know. Mm. I mean, I can't say, because on a level, I love study. Mm-hmm. And I love people who are learned in their subjects. I think there's few things as marvelous as a teacher explaining something you're interested in. Mm-hmm. I cherish that. But it does have to have a usefulness, I think. Again, it comes down, is it useful?
Right.
So, I felt that way with Marie's work an awful lot. It's like, yeah, Francis Bacon wrote the Shakespeare plays. That does not change anything for me. It's an interesting theory. It would be interesting if it happened, but it's not going to change anything. But if I understand certain scientific facts, that could change my perception of a lot of stuff. So there's got to be a beauty in it for someone.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I feel like that, especially in.
Also, you've got to remember, a lot of academics helped me edit this book.
Yeah.
These are some brilliant women that helped me with this book. And so those are teachers. And like I said, there are a few things I hold in higher esteem than a teacher.
Yeah.
But your teachers will come in all forms. Maybe they're learned in studies, maybe they're martial arts teachers, maybe they're philosophical, but they're teachers, and the teachers are a treasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to express this so well, but one of the things that I think about, because I've got, a background in both philosophy and religious studies. And for me, philosophy, I have a love-hate relationship with it. And I think that I'm kind of like you, where it's like, yes, I can get some of this, but at the end of the day, I want something that's practical. So I am far more interested in questions of how should I live? How can I be happy? Versus some of this, truly kind of esoteric stuff that's not even meant to be esoteric. Someone writing a 500-page screed on a paragraph from Kant.
Yeah.
I remember looking at doctoral programs, and I was looking at the titles of dissertations that students were doing, and 9 out of 10 of them made me feel dead inside. So I appreciate your comments, because it seems like, there are teachers and there's philosophy, but somehow it has been murdered in a way, or twisted beyond all recognition. And so that's why I personally see the value in what Manly Palmer Hall was doing. And I really don't care.
Actually, what you're describing is basically a Marie moment. And Marie would turn around and say, "Oh, Papa, it's just dusty old books by dusty old men with dusty old ideas. You need something new, something that's vital, So there you go. When old dust eaters, as she'd also call them, apparently the Masons were often under fire for that. Dusty old Masons in particular.
Well,
and I think it's just because of that limited mindset, just repeating the same thing over and over, and that's called a religion or a way of life, or an intelligent thought, for that matter. You're just being a parrot at that time. And I've met a lot of parrots that are a lot more creative. They know how to use Siri.
Well, I think there's value to some of the old ideas, but it's
there
not in all of them. Not in all of them.
Go and read some Aristotle. Read Plotinus on the Beautiful. If you want to have your heart lifted into the stratosphere, Plotinus on the Beautiful. That's where you want to go.
Okay. Yeah. Plotinus is on my list. I need to read some Plotinus.
Oh yeah.
All right. So just a couple more questions for you, because I know we're almost out of time here.
Wait. And before I sign off on that, but just understand that the Masons are really nice guys. Okay. Marie was just being rough. Okay. She was German. She was a little bit rough. But not that I met a lot of very nice Masons. Okay. When I was at PRS, they're very nice people.
I interviewed a Mason a while back, and he happened to be in town giving a lecture at a Masonic temple in South Pasadena. So we actually got together for lunch, and he was a very pleasant person.
Aren't they lovely?
Yeah.
They actually are lovely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that with any society that has a secret aspect to them, that there's always going to be rumors and rumors of rumors about them.
Yeah. They happen to like to have their meetings, you know, and like, oh, well, they must be doing something sinister in there. Yeah, they're having coffee and discussing books.
Right.
You know, should we really be into Thomas Taylor? I don't know. You know, he's not really that good. Well, I didn't get accredited. You know,
yeah. So what I may know the answer to this, but I'm going to go ahead and ask the question anyway. What do you think that Manly Palmer Hall would hope that his legacy would be?
That people would be excited about understanding the ancient wisdom that philosophers, dusty old masons, and all those types had brought forward to this point. To know that you can find wisdom in all those conversations and all those writings and all those teachings. That those things can give you a beautiful way of approaching your own life right now that makes it so much lovelier to be here. And even when you're confronted with what seems like insurmountable odds, which is the challenge of every soul that incarnates on this plane, there are ways of getting through it and not being damaged by it, but actually building back better. Good one, President Biden. That's a good one. There are things that we can be taught, that have been taught through time, that will always sustain us, even in our darkest moments.
Yeah, those timeless truths. Yeah.
And the truth will always come through.
Right. Yeah. And that's the value of those dusty old books.
Exactly.
Right.
By the way, she made dusty old books too.
Yeah, I found them on Amazon. I do want to ask you this question. Hopefully it's not going to take us too much over time, but I was curious. You left PRS and you and your husband started a band.
Yeah.
And you wrote in the book, you describe your venture into music as a metaphysical experiment.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, what did you mean by that?
Well, as we proceeded through our new beginning in music, it of course brought up a lot of, personal issues. How do you be a couple in music, which seemed really not the right thing to do? How do we bring in this idea of the equality of male female life experience? How do you bring that into music? All these things. And then at the same time, while we were pondering these metaphysical issues, we ended up landing right in the middle of a particular style of music that was addressing the equality between the sexes, patriarchy, how it affects women, and all that, Riot Girl. And in process of becoming a musician, I found I could suddenly, where I could not before, express myself fully, in fact, and do it in a comfortable way for me, which was either being almost a romanticized version, fairy tale books. So writing songs. In songwriting, I could either go for the fairy tale style song, the pretty song, or I could do, a 2-minute punk song that was just an absolute, a 2-minute stand-up comedy routine, lambasting patriarchy. And it was absolutely hilariously good fun. I don't think I've ever laughed so hard in my life. Always being able to write punk songs was like one of the most fun things ever. not knowing how to play guitar. And this is the guitar playing I'm putting behind these weird words. And it was completely acceptable. In fact, it was very well received and understood. And that was the beauty of it. It became, I love to equate the thing that I learned from Riot Girl, which was because most of the women in Riot Girl, the girls in Riot Girl, were girls coming from abusive situations. They'd experienced abuse, oppression, violence, all that nasty stuff that goes with the patriarchy. And even being in music was defying a patriarchal rule. And when we did this, when we took up that, all right, I'm going to shout the loud, funny words, and I'm going to use amplification. When we did that, we were actually reaching back. Here's the psychology behind it. We were actually reaching back to the child before the child was abused. And we were learning to play. We were learning to have our childhood again, reclaiming the damaged child and rebuilding the damaged child into a healthy human being, a healthy adult woman. That's why it was called Girl. We were grown-ups. We knew we were grown-ups, but we were reclaiming the child that had been hurt. And that was part of it. So we got to be as aggro as we wanted to be. And there was a lot of aggro to deal with. That was musical therapy, I would call it. I learned to stand up and speak for myself. I learned to defend myself. Here's a little tie-in. I learned to call out people that I thought were bad and stand there and go, yeah, prove that you're not, because I know you are. And I did that publicly. I called people out from stage that 5 minutes before had been harassing me in the parking lot, and they thought they were going to get away with it. And in fact, what happened was they got called out right where they stood and they backed off. I didn't. And that was really great. That's redemption in a way. Psychologically, that is redemption. So little fun things like that.
Sure.
And that's kind of an alchemical feat right there, to take base metal and turn it into gold. To take a terrible situation, face it, know that you're facing it, and turn it around.
Yeah, beautifully said. And I really admire the creativity and the empowerment that you embody in your work, both in the writing, and I have watched some of the Lucid Nation videos as well.
Oh God.
Well,
I didn't say it was pretty.
I love a good punk song every now and then.
That's good for the soul.
It is. It's very good for the soul.
Exactly.
And it's so authentic, I think.
Also, the punks, very underestimated wit.
Yeah,
that's what I always feel so bad about. It's like, these guys were funny.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So what's next for you?
Well, we have a couple more books coming out.
Okay.
We're waiting for this pesky bug to go away so we can get back with our musicians, because musicians like to work in the same room. That's kind of a thing. Ronnie has a book coming out in next year.
Okay.
I'm a writer.
Can you say what the book is?
It is called American Metaphysical Religion, a Mystical Magical Mystery Tour. And then after that, we have in 23, a reboot of the Hymns of Orpheus that we did in the book that I wrote.
All right. Well, when these books come out, I will have to have Ronnie on and have you back on.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah. So one final question is, where can people go to find out more about you and your work? Do you have a website or?
Working on the website, on Facebook, got Twitter, Instagram. And they can get the book on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, the bookstores. I guess it's everywhere, really.
Yeah. Well, I'll put the link for the book on Inner Traditions, the publisher.
Yeah.
And I usually, if they have it, I will usually put the link for bookshop.org.
Yeah.
because no one needs to buy anything from Amazon because Jeff Bezos is already too rich. And if I can, I'll find your Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and I can put links to those as well
Awesome.
in the show notes in the video description on YouTube.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Tamra, thank you so much for your time today. It has been a true pleasure speaking with you.
Oh, thank you, Nicholas.
And that's a wrap on episode 24 of Rebel Spirit Radio. Thank you so much for listening or watching if you are part of my YouTube audience. If you enjoyed this podcast, please make sure to give it a positive rating on whatever platform you use to listen to podcasts. It only takes a second, and your 5-star ratings really do help. If you have a minute to spare, consider posting a short, positive review. And please consider subscribing. For those viewing on YouTube, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you will be informed when I upload new content. I've been releasing episodes weekly and would like to continue doing so. I'm also working on creating additional video content for the YouTube channel, including book reviews, educational videos on topics concerning spirituality, the history of religion, and the religious response to the climate crisis. But that extra content takes a lot of time and work. If you would like to support me in creating free and credible material on YouTube and continuing with the podcast, please consider making a one-time donation via PayPal. You can find a link for that in the video description or show notes. Your support makes my work possible. I'm Nick Mather, and you've been listening to Rebel Spirit Radio. Until next time, may you be in peace, may you flourish in all possible ways, and may you continue to nurture your rebel spirit.